You're good, man.
All
Ken,
right,
take
all
it
right.
away.
All right, guys. Welcome. Today we have here on the DadBUB show a very, very special guest and a good friend of my good friend, Matt Ryder. We got Mr. Jeremy Miner. He is the chairman of Seventh Level, a global sales training company that is ranked as one of the fastest growing companies in the United States by Inc. magazine. Now, Jeremy has been featured in Wall Street Journal, Forbes, Inc. magazine, Entrepreneur magazine, and a host of other publications. So it's pretty safe to say this guy is a mega deal. Now, Jeremy has created the single most effective way to sell anything to anyone. And that's truly by finding or becoming a problem finder and a problem solver, not a product pusher. And they're generally the people that you see at your car yards and this and that are just trying to push things down your throat and not really are too concerned about what you need, what you want, and the problems that you have in your life and the problems that this car or this service or this solution is going to solve for you. So Jeremy Miner has really embodied this philosophy, and it has made him one of the most wealthiest sales professionals on the planet. So without further ado, Jeremy Miner, welcome to the show. Thank you very much for being here.
Hey, Brendo, thanks for having me on your podcast. It's an honor. And, I've been in Forbes and Wall Street Journal about being the greatest dad on planet Earth. No, I'm just joking.
Oh, that's
I,
awesome.
I've been in those publications, always for sales training, but I had to throw that out. So thank you very much.
All right, so Jeremy, so we've just had a chat off screen. Now, obviously, you've done so much in sales, and featured in these things, and have had great business partners, which we can touch on in a sec. But I went through your profile to work out how many kids you had, and you've just told us that you have 5. So Ken and I literally have one each, so one freshie each. And I'm thinking, how does anyone even go back for 2? But 5.
Well, I wanted a basketball team for sure. So I started when I was really, really young. I became a really, really young dad. I had my first daughter. Her name is Cammie. I had her when I was 22. So very, very young. I was still in college. She is actually in college here at Arizona State, here in the United States, here about 20 minutes south of my office here. She is actually 20 years old.
Wow,
So
there you
I
go.
started having kids when I was really, really young. So for the most part, I missed a lot of the college experience because I got married really young, kids really young. I had Quincy, my second daughter, when I was like 23 maybe.
Yeah.
Shelby when I was 25, Jackson when I was 27. So I had 4 kids by the time I was 27. Okay.
Yeah,
So
wow.
by the time most people are just kind of like, oh, I don't know what I want to do in my life. Like I already had 4 kids, was already doing everything and was just surpassing everybody in that sense. Now, I went through a divorce about probably, was it 12 years ago? So about 12 years ago, I went through a divorce. Okay. So I had my 4 kids. I was the young dad. I'm like, man, this is great. I'm the young dad. By the time I get to 40, my kids are, 42, 44. They're going to be at a high school. This is going to be great. I'm like the young dad. All my other friends are having their kids like 32, 35. They're going to be the old dads. Like, sucks for them. That's what was my
I'll
attitude.
put my
Like,
hand up.
sucks
That's
for
me.
you. Because it sucks for you guys, man. I got this out of the way really, really quickly so I could focus on everything else. And so then I went through divorce. Life happens. It changes. People grow apart. And then I was single for about 5 years and got remarried. And we had another baby, which was awesome. And so we have a 3.5-year-old named Sophie. She's the love of my life, along with my other kids as well. And I went from being the young dad to now the old dad. So
Awesome.
sometimes it just happens that way,
So
But it's been a blessing.
you've got both experiences then, and I think that we can circle back and touch on all of them. But like delving into being, 22, which in today's standards is like young to be married and have your first baby, and going through a little bit of your details. And I think at that stage, like you said, you were still in college. I don't think you'd really found your way in sales at that time. So how did you go from?
I had no choice. I had to. Like
Okay.
I literally I was forced to because I was probably barely turned 22 when Cammie was born. Okay, and so I have to get a job to pay for the basement apartment. So we moved into this basement apartment. It's like a house where people rent out the basement to you. It's like a little 2-bedroom dump. Now at that point I thought it was really nice because it was like $500 a month. Like that was a lot of freaking money. Like how am I going to afford this? My student loans are paying for this. And so I remember, one of my buddies came to me and he's like, man, there's this company, there's free pizza, It's like this recruiting meeting. You can make all this money selling like these home security things in the summer. You make enough money in the summer where you can just focus on college the rest of the year. And I'm like, wow, this is great. I still got another year of school. I'll make enough money in the summer so I can get a degree and get a real job. That was my whole mindset because I want a real job. Okay.
We should put that in quotation marks. Real job, right?
A real job.
What's a real job? Yeah.
At that time, I guess everybody has different ideas what a real job meant. And so anyways, I got into sales and I struggled greatly. I didn't know what I was doing. They didn't, they were teaching these traditional selling skills and read the books from the gurus and they had a script and would drop us off and, basically here's a script, go make some sales. We'll pick you up after dark. Right. And I thought it was going to be easy because that's what the recruiter told me. Everybody makes money. It's going to be easy. Start knocking the door, talking about the features and benefits of the product and services. And I started noticing that everybody was like, well, we don't need it. We already use somebody for that. We have this, like, we're not interested. We're good. And pretty soon I found out, and I didn't know what was triggering that at that point, but I found out the selling was not going to be as easy as what they all told me. Now, I didn't understand it was my skill set at that point, but I was kind of, to answer your question, Brandon, I was like forced into it because I was like, I have to provide. And I remember after about 7 or 8 weeks of all that rejection, hardly making any sales, and it was straight commission. Like if you don't make a sale, you make $0. And I remember one time, I cut off the subject, I was waiting to be picked up. It's probably like 10:30 at night, hot, humid summer here in the US. I'm like sweating to death. It's like your December's where it's hot out there. You guys, you're all backwards with your.
We're in it right now. We're in it right now.
Yeah.
We're in the hot summer. We're in the winter here. So I remember just like sweating to death. I'd made 0 sales that day. So I'd work like 12 hours, $0. That week I made 0 sales. So I literally had worked 60 hours that week. It was a Friday night. I'd made $0. And I remember sitting there like, rubbing like the hot concrete. I still remember like rubbing the hot concrete with my feet, like how I felt. And I felt like my legs were exhausted and I was just fatigued and I felt like broken. And I was like, maybe selling just isn't for me. You know what I'm saying? Because I wasn't making any money. And I was like, I'm going to have to go back to my wife at the time and tell them that, hey, we don't have enough money to stay in this basement apartment. We're going to have to move in with your parents. I mean, that's where it was coming to, And I remember the sales manager, when I got into the van, they pick you up in a van with like 10 other guys. Sales manager gets in, he puts in a Tony Robbins CD that completely changed everything for me. And Tony, I might be butchering, but he said most people fail for the simple reason that they don't learn the right skills necessary to succeed. They don't learn the right skills. And he goes on to say that everybody, for the most part, is taught skills. But the people who fail are the ones who are not taught the right ones. And so it's like a light bulb went off in my head that maybe what the company was training me, maybe what I was learning from the gurus, maybe they just weren't the right skills. Maybe they were just outdated and didn't work very well anymore. And that kind of started me on my journey of human behavior and behavioral science and learning how to master the human behavior within the selling process.
And you do that as your degree, right? Your studies at university.
Yeah, that's my background in college was behavioral science and human psychology. Yeah. So I was learning from my professors that the most persuasive way to communicate was here, but from all the gurus' books I was reading, they were seeing it was over here, like completely opposite. So I'm like, what am I supposed to do? So I'm like, how do I take the theory of human behavior, psychology, neuroscience, how do I plug that into the sales process where I can work with human behavior to get my prospects to pull me in rather than like push them and try to push them forward? And it made selling extremely easy at that time, way profitable. I became the #1 salesperson in the country in that industry out of like 30,000 reps, literally within 1 year when I started learning how to do that. All the way from making $0 about to quit. So it's all your skill level.
I've got a question. I just want to pull something out of that before I know that Ken's going to have a couple of more. So that week that you spent 60 hours and you earned nothing, what happened the next week?
Oh, geez, I don't remember, but I remember just it was a process. It wasn't like I went from failure to like
to sale.
3 days later I made $1 million a day. I mean, it wasn't like that or anything.
I think drilling down that process, like that process of going back, hey, we haven't earned. How did you? Sorry, drilling down that question. with the steps going, then how did you start to overcome this? Because I'm thinking,
Well,
man, I've got a baby on the way, or I've got a new baby I'm risking. The psychology of you and the pressure of being the provider must have been quite a bit to go through.
it was overwhelming. I mean, I was a 22-year-old kid that like basically had to grow up extremely quickly. And I
Yeah.
realized that if I didn't have the right skills, that I was dead for the most part. That this might be a quick marriage type of thing.
And
So
it
I
sounded
would,
like you didn't exactly have like mummy or daddy to fall back on and be
no,
like, hey, mummy, can you give me some money? Mummy, can I have this or that? It's like you had to pull your bootstraps up and be like, I've got to find the money, otherwise we're done.
it was either it was up to me or we were going to fail. So I had no
That's pretty
choice.
scary.
So like I
Yeah.
had to take what I was learning from behavioral science and interject it quick. And I started making more sales every week, right? And I think that first summer is a 3.5 month summer period. I made about 150,000 in commissions. The first month, I think I made 1,000. So that
Yeah.
next 3 months, after I started changing things and developing what is now called NEPQ, at that point it was like this much of what we do now, okay, in the sales process. But even that got me up to that range. And imagine as a 22-year-old kid, you go out and make 150,000 American dollars. This was 20 years ago. So there's probably
Yeah.
like 220,000 American dollars now in like a 3 month summer period. I felt like I was Donald Trump. I felt like I was a billionaire at that point, right? Now,
At 22,
the
you
next
pretty much were.
yeah, I know, right? So, but obviously I kept, developing the questions, weeding out things that didn't work, things that did work, learning better tonality. And, within, I think 3 years from that, I think the fourth year I was in sales, I made like 780,000 in commissions that year,
Oh, wow.
American dollars.
Amazing.
I think the next year it was like 1.1 million. Then, I was still like 27, 28. I
Yeah.
still didn't even know what I know now as
Yeah.
far as sales. I was still developing NEPQ, and then it kept going up and up and up, like you've heard the story.
It's so crazy that when you talk about that, Jeremy, because I had a somewhat of a no, actually, I'm trying to say a similar experience, but really not at all. I did human behavior and human psychology as a minor at university,
Okay.
and I loved it. And I did it because I had a business on the side, and I wanted to understand actually how to sell better. But I didn't want to be taught how to be sold. I wanted to understand what the science was. I was a science geek back in the day,
Yeah.
and when I tried to use human psychology in my sales, it just absolutely flunked because I was like, I've got to disc profile them, Myers-Briggs profile, and I'm trying to use all this psychological mumbo jumbo and put them in baskets, and it just didn't work.
It doesn't
Whereas,
work because you don't have the
yeah,
capability to be able to do that. We see so
exactly.
many sales trainers that will be like, they'll do well in an industry. Like they can teach car salespeople how to sell. But the moment they go outside of that industry they're familiar with, they're just dead. It just doesn't work. Because they're like, oh, you got to read their personality and are they a red one or a blue one or what's their psychological profile? The average salesperson cannot learn that. They are
What are
not
the stars telling us, or the numbers, the numerology, and the astrology signs?
they're not shifty enough to be able to go out and duplicate that. You have to have a step-by-step process that works for any personality. It doesn't matter if they're A type or this type or that type. It's the questions you're asking and the delivery of the questions that work with human behavior that get the prospect, no matter their personality, to want to pull you in and want to engage with you and want to open up to you.
And that's why NEPQ is so amazing. And I've done a little bit of it, and Matt shared a little bit with me. So it's just such an amazing process that you've got there. And I've seen so many people go through your program and just accelerate their sales, but not even that, not just their sales, just their communication in general has skyrocketed. And I think that's what's so amazing about NEPQ. And actually, I wouldn't mind touching on that. And if people who are listening, the listeners aren't aware, NEPQ stands for Neuro Emotional Persuasive Questions. And can I ask, because clearly this isn't just for sales, it's for relationships, and it's really for communication. And how do you find using NEPQ, say, in your family life?
Well, it's the same thing. Like if I, rather than telling my child to be like, hey, go clean up your room, it's always dirty, blah, 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 and I'm pushing them, what are they going to do back?
Push
Push
back.
back, yeah.
But if I say to let's say, I even do this with my 3.5-year-old, I'm like, well, honey, how are we going to be able to go to swim class if you don't go pick up your room? I'm asking her a how-to question. Like, how are we going to go do this, her benefit, if you don't do this, my benefit? So it's a how-to question. It's just one way. Okay, but honey, how are we going to go to your friend's birthday party if you don't pick up your room? And she, it starts her to think like, well, how can I if I don't do that? So it's just a simple, it's like an NEPQ. We would call it like a consequence question. It's a light form of a consequence question.
I love that though. I mean, how amazing is that? I try using consequence questions sometimes with my 8-month-old. Just doesn't seem to work.
I don't think it's going to work in an 8-month-old. Wait till they're probably at least 2.5 or so. They like, our 3.5-year-old, like she'll think about it. You can see her processing like, oh yeah, how can I do that? But as they get older, obviously that's something that you can do. And that's just a little example. But if you really think about it, because a lot of people will say like, oh, Jeremy, NEPQ sounds great, but I'm not in sales. Like, how could it help me? And I'm like, well, if you really think about it, everybody in our day and age is in sales. And like, no, I'm not in sales. Like I'm in IT. Well, it's like, oh, I understand. But even if you don't get paid a commission, you're still out doing what every day? You're trying to persuade, you're trying to influence, you're trying to convince, and you're trying to move others. Like, if you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to get your employees to follow the vision of where you want to take your company, what are you doing? You're trying to persuade, you're trying to influence, you're trying to convince others. If you're an employee trying to convince your boss to give you a pay raise, what are you doing? You're trying to persuade, you're trying to influence, you're trying to move others. If you're an attorney trying to convince the judge that your client is innocent, what are you doing? Persuading, influencing, moving. If you're a mom trying to get your children to go to bed at night, what are you doing? You're trying to persuade, you're trying to influence. So we're all in sales now. It doesn't matter what you do. And it's a skill that if you want to succeed in life, it is the number one skill that you must acquire, and it's something you can acquire. Nobody's born out of your mother's womb with advanced questioning skills and tonality skills. Like that is something you learn how to do. Nobody's born with that.
And I love how the typical person kind of runs it off as like, oh, you're a great salesperson. You've got the gift of the gab. It's like, well, that's an insult. I don't want the gift of the gab.
Yeah. I mean, because in our day and age, average salespeople have the gift of the gab. Like the more you talk, the more average you're going to be in the world of sales. You just are, because everybody is so used. Like, have you ever had like a prospect says, oh, you're such a great salesperson. How many of those people bought from you?
Yeah.
Probably
Zero.
Because they felt like you were trying to sell them. So
unless it's your mum. If your mum says, honey, you're such a good salesperson, of course I'll give you $10 for that. It's like, oh, thanks, mum.
Yeah, exactly. So, the gift of the gab, that's what average salespeople are in our day and age. If you want to be average, have the great gift of the gab and just talk about all your products and features and, like we've got the best this, we got the best that, which by the way, every salesperson says they have the best product or service, right? Like how many salespeople that sell to you say that they have the 5th best service in the market? Nobody.
Yeah. That's right.
They all say they have the best. So psychologically, when you tell your prospects that you have the best this, you've got the best that, we've got AAA rating at the Better Business Bureau, here's our corporate office, it looks so awesome, your prospects, just so you understand, subconsciously trust you less because they're used to every salesperson saying the exact same thing. So they categorize you with every other salesperson they've ever dealt with and had a negative experience with. Especially if you talk down about your competition, they just lump you with everybody else because they're used to every salesperson saying that, okay? So it's like taking a bucket of mud and like throwing it up against the wall, like hoping and praying that something you're gonna say, because you got the gift of the gab, is gonna magically trigger the prospect to wanna buy from you. And I call that hopium. It's like a drug that so many salespeople and entrepreneurs take where they just hope and pray something they're gonna say is gonna make the person wanna buy. And it's such a hard and unpredictable way to make a living. Like you just don't want to take a hopium drug.
Say that, Jeremy. I know, talking down on your competitors is never a great way to sell. But I love the way you and your team debunk sales pros, right? It's just so amazing, and they're just such amazing memes because it's just debunking the strategies. They're just almost scammers, really. Sometimes they just steal crap and call it their own. I won't list any names.
Sure.
I'm sure you know who I'm talking about. But look, just circling back, because I know Brendo's got a lot of questions here, and we want to kind of really pick your brain in terms of how to be an epic dad and make all the monies in the world like you. So
yeah.
You want to go for it, Brendo?
Yeah, so just going back through to the story and where you went. So obviously you mentioned you had to grow up quick. And so, with the success that you had, finances no longer become an issue. But with the work you're putting in, with the sales and commission only, and no doubt you're putting in big wigs, how did you balance being a new dad and, very quickly a multiple-time dad with working at a very high level. So how did you balance, being
Well,
a dad
I
as
still
well as
think
being a high
I don't
performer?
think that's something I've actually mastered. But if I look back at it, especially when my four kids were younger, it's
Mm,
really about having certain times after work where you're just unplugged,
yeah.
right? Where you're just, now that's hard to do. Now, as a salesperson, as an employee, it's a little bit easier than maybe like if you own your own business, especially when you're in startup mode. And let's say that your business partner, like Matt, lives in Australia and is on a completely different time zone and needs to get a hold of you at 8 at night. But you still have to set like boundaries, right? So
Mm,
what I do is I try to, I'm trying to, we have our office space here for our USA headquarters here in Scottsdale. It's only about 10 minutes away from my house. It's not very far. But what I try to do is I try to get out of here every day by 4:30 at the very most, a couple minutes to get home. And I try to just like put my phone down for like 2 hours straight, not look at it, and just focus in on my 3.5-year-old. Okay, now I'm not saying I do that perfectly every time, because maybe there's an issue, maybe there's, an employee something's going on, we got to help them. There's always something going on, but I try to literally, like, let's say from 5 to 7, or five, usually about 5 to 7 or so, not even look at my phone. Now I don't do that all the time, but I try to do that most of the time. Okay. Then, I'm playing with Sophie. That's my 3.5-year-old. And then what we do at that point, she starts getting ready for bed around 7:30, 7:45, taking a bath. So I always, every night that I'm home, I go help my spouse, give her a bath, get her ready. It's like our family time, if that makes
mm,
sense.
yeah.
And put her down to bed. We read a couple stories. Then Daddy puts her in her bed, and then I tell her two more stories. Like, we're telling stories all the time. So we read 2 stories in books, and then she wants me to tell her like 2 stories. And they're like 2 or 3 minute just stories about Smurfs or princesses or unicorns or something. And that's kind of the family time. So I'm out of her room usually by 8:30 at night. Okay.
Yep.
And then after 8:30, then I can, be with my spouse, or if I've got other things that I want to do, my spouse is a little bit more lenient and let me do that because we've had kind of more family time. On the weekends, I try to totally unplug as much as I can. And on Saturday and Sunday mornings, I get her up. I, make my daughter breakfast, just me and her. Probably spend the first hour from like 7:30, 8:30 just by ourselves. And we just do stuff. Like, I'll feed her breakfast. We just kind of hang out. We watch, Bluey from Australia.
Yo, Blue.
Right?
That's an Aussie dog. Aussie dog.
Aussie dog. So that's on Disney Junior over here, and we just kind of spend that time together. And then my wife comes down, and we do some stuff. So especially on the weekends, I try really not to do anything. If I have to do some work on the weekends, I just get up really early. So I'll get up at like 5, and I'll have like a couple of hours before they get up, where I just try to get all that stuff done. Or she'll take a nap from like 1 to 3 in the afternoon, and then during that time, I'm doing stuff. But the other time when she's up, I'm focused on her. And guys, I'm not perfect, but
sure.
that's
Yeah.
what I do.
Jeremy, do you mind? Do you mind if I ask, right? Because this is now, you're 3.5-year-old now, and your position now is very, very different to what it was 20 years ago.
Sure.
And what I mean by that is, like, you have Matt as a CEO, you have James helping you out, you have a whole team behind you. I think you've got, is it 80 employees now, or you've got even more than that? Am I wrong by saying
With
that?
all of our salespeople and everything, like for our done for you stuff, it's over 100 now.
Yeah, amazing, right? So you've got 100 people that you can rely on, you can utilize. Of course, 100 people doesn't mean that your life gets easier. Sometimes it gets harder dealing with people. But saying that, it's like, it's not just you anymore. It's, you can sit back, and the team is making money for the company, but also for you. But back 20 years ago, the only money you earned was the hours that you put in to make the sale.
Sure.
I know when in sales, sometimes it's like, I will take a 9 p.m. meeting. I will take a 4 a.m. meeting. I will take this. I will skip on a date night with my wife because I just want to make this commission so I can make this sale. Because in my mind, more money makes my wife happier, but in the long run, it can very much quickly ruin a relationship.
I mean, it really just depends. Like when I was a salesperson, I had it so dialed in because of my skill level that prospects were really chasing me. Like, they were working around my schedule. I wasn't really working around their schedule. Does that make sense? Like, I see
Yeah.
so many salespeople that we start training, especially realtors, and they're like showing homes Monday at 9, Sunday at 7 p.m. And I'm like, what are you doing? You're letting people just roll you around.
Yeah.
You take control of that conversation where they view you as the expert and the trusted authority. And I'm telling you, they will work around your schedule. So once I had figured that out and learned those type of sales skills, because let's say if I make a call, like an outbound lead, and like, oh, now's not a good time. Can you call me back on the weekend? Well, a lot of salespeople are like, yeah, sure. What time can I call you? I'm like, yeah, I apologize. I wouldn't be available on the weekends for sure. What I can do though, if you have your calendar handy, I can pull up mine and have you book a specific time with me and vice versa during like business hours. That way you don't have to chase me down and vice versa. Would that help you? And that changes the whole dynamic of that conversation. Because then they're like, whoa, well, huh? Like that way you don't have to chase me down and vice versa. So what I can do if you have your calendar handy, I can pull up mine and have you book a specific time with me during like normal business hours. That way you don't have to chase me down and vice versa. Would that help you? Now, what instantly goes off in that person's mind?
Well, it's like I don't want to. It's almost like a doctor frame, really. It's like, oh well, okay, yes, I suppose I will book a time that works with you.
This guy's an expert. He's not just like some salesperson I can just do whatever I want with them with. Right? I mean, you don't want to live that type of life. No. So it immediately it's called like a status frame. Okay, so that status frame, I become a higher status in that frame than them at that point. So when I'm a higher status, they look at me as more of an expert. Does that make sense? So now they start to work around my schedule because normal business hours make sense. Like I'm a person, I'm helping you solve problems. Like why would I work for you at 9 o'clock at night? Do you want to work for me at 9 o'clock at night? Right? Yeah. So I'm working during normal business hours. So you immediately raise your status with that status frame and they start to respect you more. Okay. No more calling on the weekend. No more working at 7, 8, 9, 10 p.m. at night. You don't have to do all that. I didn't do any of that. And, at the height of my career, I was making almost $3 million a year in straight commissions. And I wasn't working past 4 or 5 in the afternoon. I damn sure wasn't working on the weekends.
Yeah. Nice. I love that.
With Brendan, that then, I guess that leads into that as well. So not so much then as a dad, although it does float into it. So right now in your life, like how do you structure your day to be a high-performing and a successful person? And that's like, from when you wake up, do you have a fitness routine? You go into the gym. How do you prepare?
I do. I'm really structured because I try to get a lot done during the day. Even though we're growing pretty rapidly and stuff, there's still a lot to do, right? I'm not a person that likes to set back and be like, oh well, we'll get there down the road. I'm like, no, we're gonna get there tomorrow. Like I don't want to wait 2 years. Like I want to be here now. So I'm willing to put in the work to do that, to get there. So
I love how when you talk about that, Jeremy, it's like you've sold yourself in your mind. I make decisions and I'm gonna action them now. It's like when you're selling someone over the phone or face to face, it's like they have to act now. Don't wait down the road. We're not gonna kick this down the road. It's like you do this same process for yourself, which is so refreshing because so many salespeople teach people how to make decisions, but don't make decisions themselves very good at all.
Yeah, 100%. So what I do is I get up at 5 Monday through Friday. So I'm an early riser. I get up right at 5 a.m. I have CrossFit right at 5:30. So I have a CrossFit class. CrossFit, luckily for me, is literally three minutes away. It's like literally like 3 minutes away. I'm like, yes.
So I get Jeremy, there. That's my CrossFit Games t-shirt. Just there.
Wow.
So that's my team's t-shirt. Yeah, I'm a solid CrossFit frother. So we're
okay. I'm an CrossFit I go to CrossFit class. Let me clarify this. I go to CrossFit class. I'm definitely not to your stature in CrossFit. I do go about 4 to 5 times a week though. But I'm an old man, Okay. So anyways, I get there at 5:30, usually a minute or two late. Okay. The class gets over at 6:30. Drive back home, 3 minutes away. It's really nice. Okay, and immediately from about 6:35 to about 7:15, I get back to my one-on-one clients that have paid a lot of extra money to have access to me one-on-one through Voxer, where they can ask me questions. Okay, it's a very limited people. We only got 100 in that whole program a whole year. Okay, so I get back to the people who message me in about 30 to 40 minutes. That's what I do every day, Monday through Friday. That's the time I get back to them. Okay, then I go take a shower real quick. Come in, eat breakfast, just real quick, and usually around 7:40-ish, 7:30, 7:40, Sophie wakes up. So I go grab her, and from about 7:45 till about 8:15, that 30 to 35 minutes, I just hang out with her, dance around the kitchen, play, just stuff like that. And then I usually leave for the office, so probably about, at the latest, sometimes I'll leave at 8:30, but usually about 8:20. The office is 10 minutes away. It's really nice, very convenient. Okay, so I get in the office 8:30, 8:40, and then usually my day starts right at 9. I've got They've either got like an appointment with some type of company we're already training. I'm writing out their sales structure. It seems like these days I'm on a podcast. Like there's something scheduled. Or from like say 9 to 12, I'm writing more content for our portal. Like there's always something scheduled. I'm not just like sitting here like, oh, I'm going to play some games on my phone. Like, just don't have that.
Yeah.
And so I have certain parts of the day where we have like our group training calls for salespeople, companies. So it's all just stacked. And I have a podcast usually. Like yesterday I was on one podcast. Today this is my second podcast. Tomorrow I've got 3 podcasts. So that's kind of all structured out. But usually like this podcast that I'm with you guys right now, this is the last thing I'm doing. So right after here, turn off the lights, leave the building, go back home, and I'll be back by 4:20ish, 4:30. So it's just schedule. Right before I got on here with you, I had about a 15-minute break from my last training. It's called Advanced Inner Circle. And on Wednesdays here, I break down recorded sales calls for some of our one-on-one clients that pay me to do that. So it's like an hour and 20-minute training call. I do every single Wednesday. I had about a 15-minute break, in between before the podcast. I went down the hall to the bathroom, came right back in, got on this form, and here I am. So everything is structured with me because I want to get the most done in the least amount of time. I don't want to sit around doing nothing.
Love it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so can I ask a question there, Jeremy? Because you're a pretty learned dude, right? You've been to university, you've been to college, you've studied all the things, you've read all the sales books, you found out that a lot of them were crap, but some of them were really good. And I know you've taken inspiration from a lot of stuff in the past. I know I've watched a lot of your stuff and heard you talk about some really great books in the past. And something you always say constantly is training something that you did or is training something that you do? And I really love that analogy. And I have to just think back to when you were a younger guy with your first kids. Was that in your mind with being a dad? I know with sales, definitely. But being a dad was like, I've got to learn something because I'm a new dad. I don't know how to do this. So how did you learn to be a dad?
Okay, well, first of all, let me credit who I got that quote from. So it's a good friend of mine, Brad Lee. So Brad Lee always says, because we have our training platform with his company, Lightspeed VT. And I love the quote. He's like, is training something you did or is training something you do? So I want to quote the right person. I do quote him all the time, but I want to make sure he gets due credit for that quote because I think it's an awesome quote. But I would say when I was younger, man, I was so focused on my career. I mean, I spent a lot of time with my kids. I think more than most dads did, especially with the income I was making. But if I look back at it, I think I read a few books and stuff, but I was more focused on my career, which, could have been, there's always 2 to tango in any divorce. So that obviously made my spouse at the time a little bit more upset because I was focused on my career, even though I probably only worked 7 or 8 hours a day. But, could I have done better? For sure. Was I a bad dad? No, for sure. But I think with Sophie, I've just been more like wanting to learn more. I was young. I mean, dude, I was 22.
Yeah.
When you're 22, or you're like, I'm gonna read a book on toddlers about love languages. Like you don't really think about it when you're 22 and 23, right? I'm just trying to survive. Like how do I make sure to pay for everything was on my mind. You know what I mean? But when we had Sophie, I was more like a little bit more mature, right? We had her when I was pretty much almost 40. And so I was a little bit more mature and I'm like, okay, how do I learn how to do this? How do I learn how to do this? We brought more experts in, right? Like my wife brings tutors in. She's in preschool. We had we have a nanny that stays with us to help out. Like there's different things that I learned from my first go around with my kids who are now older that, mistakes I learned that, okay, with this, I've learned from those mistakes. Let's, fix those mistakes and be able to do better. So sometimes it's just going through it and learning. You just don't know what you don't know sometimes. And so when you have when you guys have your second child, if you have 2 kids, I think you guys both have 1, right?
Yeah, we both have
we
one.
do, yeah.
Yeah.
So let's say you have your second one, you're going to know a lot more what to do with the second one than you did with the first one. Because I'm assuming, I'm just going to go out on a limb, that when you had your first child, you and your spouse were really, really nervous. You were like, oh my gosh, just like, oh my gosh, so scared all the time. But when you had your second kid, you're like, oh yeah, it's just normal. Like, oh, she bumped her head, she's fine. First kid, you're like, bumped her head, oh my gosh, we need to get a neurosurgeon. She hit her head on the coffee table, oh my gosh. But it's just the way it is. But when you have another 2 or 3 kids, you're like, oh yeah, I've already been through that. She's fine, just gonna be a bruise, no big deal.
It's so funny, Jeremy. I know when I used to come back from the office every day, I'd be like, babe, honey, how was your day? She's like, yeah, it was good. How was Nate? She's like, I kept him alive. It was a good day. I was
Yeah,
like, you kept him alive. Fuck. I hope you
yeah.
did.
Very much similar.
So,
High five. It was high five and lots of tears, definitely in the early stages. So Jeremy, I know that you want to head off and that you're going to finish up and go spend time for your family. So to finish off, obviously there's a lot of new dads that are listening to this. So 3 tips for those who want to be a boss as a dad, a boss in business, and a boss with their relationships. And you've got a wealth of experience of this.
I'd say the biggest tip is really just learn from people who know stuff you don't know. If I could go back to when I was 22 or 23 and just buy a book on how your kids feel loved. Like, there's a great book, called The 5 Love Languages for Relationships, but there's also a book about how your children feel loved. And I read that probably about 10 years ago, after my kids were, 5, 6, 8, 10. I wish I would have known that when they were like 3 or 4 or 5, because they develop so young that if you don't know what to do in those early ages from like 3 to 8, their whole life is impacted the rest of their life, right? It's like they have to overcome all these things. So just gaining knowledge, starting out, just by reading some books, taking some courses, just fills in the gaps of what you just don't know. Like, unless you're like going to college for that subject and you're really being taught by people who know what they're doing, you just don't know what you don't know. So I would say the first tip is to learn to fill in the gaps. That's got to be the first tip. The second tip I would say is just, try to do your best to spend quality time with them. I know it's hard, like, especially, with guys, sometimes we're just out there, we're like hustling. We want to impress our spouses. We want to make a lot of money. We want to be successful, that we just put off just spending time with them. And as you guys know, a lot of women, their love language is just quality time. And especially if you've got daughters, a lot of their love languages is quality time. So my daughter does the same thing, like, Daddy, don't go, blah, blah. I'm like, I'm like, oh my gosh, she's on my leg. I'm like, I gotta go, I got a meeting. But it's just spending some quality time. And that's for you. If it's just the weekends you can do that, just focus on them. You might be tired from your work or exhausted or whatever, but if you can just kind of put that aside and know that, hey, what I do right now with my kids is going to affect them as adults, then that makes it a little bit more important to you. Okay.
For sure.
So that would be my second tip. Now, what is my third tip?
Oh, you've got to dig deep. That was gold, by the way. So whatever you go from here, that one's going to be hard to beat.
My third tip is, learn. Well, this is, I'd say, one of the most important things, because it's going to affect your family, their families for generations to come, is learn the right skills. I don't care what you do. If you're in sales, learn the right skills. If you're in management, learn the right skills. If you're in leadership, learn the right skills. If you're in IT, learn the right skills, because your financial income and your skill level that you learn determines your financial income. Your financial income determines, for a lot of your family's like history that's about to happen, what they do, right? Like, if you can provide a great lifestyle for your family, it not only it impacts them, but it also impacts their kids. It impacts their way of thinking. Literally, it's like the butterfly effect, okay?
Yeah.
Like, I grew up really in a very, very poor, like lower middle class family, if that, okay? There were some circumstances that happened that caused that or whatever, but I had to fight my way out of that way of thinking. If I had started not having that thinking in the first place, I might be way ahead of where I'm at now. So if you can just establish that roots for your family, for your kids, and like show them what success looks like, they're going to think it's normal to succeed.
Yeah.
But if you, on the flip side, you don't learn the right skills and you don't succeed, they're going to think it's normal not to succeed. And they're going to be skeptical. And they're going to be negative. And then when they have kids, they're going to teach them the same thing. And when those kids have kids, they're going to teach them the same thing. And it just goes on for generations. It's like this whole butterfly effect. You can put a stop by that by learning the right skills now, having a ton of success, and your kids are just going to think it's freaking normal to succeed. And they're going to teach their kids like that. And you just completely change the dynamic of your family for like the next 500 years. It's crazy to think about.
Yeah, man. That's really
amazing.
impactful. That's so good.
Jeremy, oh, sorry, Brendan, do you want to ask another question?
No, man. I was going to hand over to you. You're good, Ken.
Okay, easy. Well, hey, guys, Look, if you guys want to check out or see more of Jeremy Miner, I know he's got a fantastic Facebook group. I'm personally in it. It's just www.salesrevolution.group. All right, www.salesrevolution.group. Or you can easily just find Jeremy Miner on Instagram, Facebook, and all those types of things, and it'll direct you straight to his
Yeah, if
Facebook
they're,
group.
if they're a salesperson, if they're a coach, they're a consultant, they're a business owner, sales manager, management, anything, and they want to learn how to sell more of their products and services they are now, that's going to be the best place for them to learn. Just have them go to salesrevolution.group, and right when they join, somebody in my team will message them in Facebook Messenger. So check your Facebook Messenger. People are like, "Where? I didn't get the message." You got to check your Messenger, and they'll message you a free training called the NEPQ 101 mini course, and it's just a smaller course, okay, that we give away for free, with a bunch of different questions you can ask for different sales situations you're going to be in. That's just going to put you light years ahead of anybody else that's competing for that account. Okay. And,
except the people that are in your inner circle, right?
Well, yeah, and in our paid training courses, obviously there's like 100-fold of that, but that's just kind of give them a little hors d'oeuvre to chew on. Okay?
Yeah.
And Matt and I, my business partner, our sales trainers, we go live in that Facebook group 3 to 4 times a week with different trainings, different Q&As, and it doesn't matter. We train hundreds of different industries at this point. So if they want to learn how to persuade, influence, sell more of their products and services, that's going to be the best place for them to get that introduction, salesrevolution.group.
Now, Jeremy, if people want to learn how NEPQ can help them in their dating life, is there NEPQ for dating, or is it the same thing?
Just have them join the Facebook group. Funny thing is, we teach several companies now that actually sell dating services to men and women.
Nice.
Teach them how to get more dates.
That's so good.
Nice. I love that. That's so good.
Jeremy, thank you so much for that. It's just been a wealth of knowledge. I've taken away so much, and I'm sure that Ken has as well. Just before we depart, before you go, are you doing the CrossFit Open?
Man, I am not to your level, brother. Here's what the reason why I go to CrossFit is so I don't develop like some belly. You know what I'm saying?
No, Jeremy, we are on the same level. I'm 36. I'm just trying to be a fit dad as well. Only anyone who does CrossFit would understand that question.
I don't, I've got like, I'm in between the dad bod and like the 12 pack. So I'm trying to stay, I don't want the dad bod. I don't necessarily have to have the 12 pack, but I don't want to have the dad bod, that's just the belly that sticks out. Like I refuse to be like that. So that's why I go to CrossFit.
You look super fit to me. Jeremy, thank you so much.
You look
really
way fitter
appreciate
than
it.
me. I got to get on what you're on, dude.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks,
Jeremy. Thank you so much for your time. Hey, Jeremy, just before you shoot off, because I know you're about to jump off.